Climate change. We've all heard of it, but do we really know what it means? Climate change, by definition, is the current heating up of our planet as a result of the amount of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. There are a lot of ways carbon dioxide is currently being made, such as the burning of fossil fuels like coal or turf, either for heat at home or the production of materials in factories. In countries such as Brazil, farmers are allowed to burn forests to make room for land. This is what led to the Amazon fires breaking out in August of this year, which released so much unnecessary CO2 and was said to be very bad for the environment. Unfortunately, rising temperature doesn't just mean that we'll get nicer weather. The changing climate is actually making our weather more extreme and unpredictable. We know this because of the major increase in sea level, droughts, floods, heat waves, and extreme weather events from the last century. Some facts on climate change include sea levels have risen 17 centimeters in the last 100 years due to the sea level expanding from heat and the glaciers melting. As well as that, the warming of the sea poses a threat to a lot of sea creatures, as their environment has changed and they are finding it hard to survive. Because of this, thousands of them have died and continue to do so until we change something. So what can we do? First of all, we can recycle and reuse things. Second, we can walk, cycle, or use public transport to go places instead of taking individual cars, which release a lot of carbon dioxide. We can turn off our electronics when we're not using them to save electricity. We can also eat less meat or eat locally grown vegetables to stop the need for importing food from other countries, which wastes a lot of fuel and again emits a lot of CO2. Everyone can do small things to combat climate change, although there are some young activists that are doing big things to combat it right now. The obvious first example is Greta Thunberg. So, who is Greta? Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old climate activist and is probably the most famous young activist in the world right now. At 15, she began the school year by striking for what she believed in. She believed that the Swedish government weren't doing enough to combat the effects of climate change. Because of this, she decided to take a Friday off of school and sit down outside the Swedish Parliament in Stockholm with a painted piece of cardboard that read, "School Strike for Climate." She began to strike every Friday, pledging to continue boycotting classes for as long as it took for the Swedish government to live up to the Paris Agreement on climate change. On her Twitter account, she called the campaign Fridays for Future. From the first of those Fridays, she was no longer alone outside Parliament, but joined by others who believed in what she was doing as well. The movement was soon spread over Swedish towns and across national borders to Germany, Belgium, the UK and elsewhere. By mid-March of last year, #Fridays for Future had become a truly global movement, with strikes on every continent. Her small action had a phenomenal impact. Greta is truly an inspiration and has inspired millions of people. Our next young climate activist has played a major role in organising a few of the Fridays for Future strikes, as well as so much more. Her name is Beth Daugherty. She's done a lot. For example, she spoke at the student strike on March 15th, where she gave a speech in front of 11,000 people, criticising the government for not taking enough action regarding climate change. She's written pieces for the journal.ie, addressed members of the Oireachtas on climate change, been heavily involved in organising climate strikes, and has worked with Dublin City Council on the county's new climate plan. But most importantly, she is a member of the recently created Climate Assembly, where she represents Dublin. Here she's able to ask tough questions to the government directly and achieve even more, as seen in this clip.
We can no longer allow companies to profit off the killing of our planet. For our government to ignore this proposal, and indeed the Youth Assembly as a whole, is to turn a blind eye to the cause of climate change, is to ignore the real roots of the issue, and is to dismiss our futures. And we would like to remind them that we will remember their reaction when we get to the voting age. Thank you.
Another female youth activist for climate change has spoken at one of the strikes recently and has strong opinions on the subject. Her name is Molly Hawke. She's a 17-year-old who is very concerned for the safety of our planet. On March 17th of last year, Molly was invited to speak at the Student Strike for Climate. She spoke in front of over 10,000 people and gave an empowering message that stated that we need to take action. But I'll let her tell you the rest.
Hi, my name is Molly Hawke and I spoke at the Friday for Futures March in March 2019. Well, I was approached to speak at the rally because my school wasn't allowed to go to the march, but we all did anyway, so I felt like I needed to represent the people who either weren't allowed to go or couldn't go. Well, I was always kind of like scared rising sea levels and things. It's like growing up with those feelings has just kind of turned into an actual belief to change. So it's kind of just always been there. It's just been growing. I feel like in 50 years, it would be less about how the world is affected, and we'll finally see how it's affecting humans. So we'll have a lot more people who have breathing difficulties, and also people in the developing world that rely on like farming and things will be really affected. So that will mean that we'll have more migration to Europe and America and everything. So basically, like, our situation is going to get worse gradually.
In conclusion, from this you can see how dangerous climate change really is. By the year 2030, the effects that climate change is having will be irreversible. These young, strong women have shown us how much they are willing to do to combat the worldwide crisis. Everyone can help fight this in some way, and the faster we act, the more of a chance we have of living in a world where climate change doesn't exist. Young people can do a lot. Time to prove it.